Alektrona by darf, with 178 thumbs up, 45 thumbs down, 161 comments, and 3,013 referrals. The only tag for the story is Slice of Life. Twilight makes a trip across town in search of something to wake her up. Sometimes awareness is where we least expect it. Warning: contains unnecessarily verbose, overly complicated, inscrutably dense literary self-indulgence. The characters that star in the story are Twilight Sparkle, Cheerilee, Lyra Heartstrings, and Caramel. At Rising of Dawn, with 5,281 words. At fall, a fitting wake. In format for waking in good form, aspirational astringencies and vestiges of overnight mind's eye emulsification. Clouded head rest in bed, rest until waking, and obfuscation emergent in contemplation from a valley of fog. Sheets shifted in the night, like a coil of serpent's wings. Spent the night in too many pages. That old one cracking, spine needs rebinding, respinding, the night's savings returning with interest. Around this hour, what hour, when the window light is in, eyes burn, buried down face first, come on and face the world. There was no breakfast upon awaking, arising attention to surrounding. Twilight Sparkle raised both hooves to both eyes, and rubbed both with both sides of a passing night and a heavy morning. Arduously, she circumspied the room to remind that it was still there. Breakfast. Good days are unurgent. Go to get up and the world is inside. Cereal and toast on a platter. Bringing by that rye bread again. Mrs. Cake makes it sometimes. Too much time to pick up, when it's talk always on here nor there, sending him instead. Little claw marks on the time. Can't count the change, otherwise fine. Vessels and vestiges opened with twilight's daybreak locomotion yawning. The whole world regrew at night, and her in bed with it. She was a purple speckled egg rested in a bed nestle, felt like she had sprouted limbs in sleeping. Stretch. You're shorter in the morning. Where did I read that? In Illustrated? No. Encyclopedia of? No. On the Science of? No. Overheard it. Remember Dash saying it. Test for veracity later. Like smiling when she told me something. Smiles that start anew like cheerful eggs. Eggs. Toast? Clop hooves on bare board clattered in announcement as Twilight took form from her cocoon. The light speckled the room, separate from the darkness, and lit doting motes of dirty air as they tumbled downwards. Little flecks, sour morning on her teeth. How much dust, and how it would return. Though it was well into morning, measured steps on the staircase kept Downturn silent. No sense in waking him if he wasn't up. He liked to sleep in just as much, if not more. Still so small, there'd be no room of him left in the mornings. Have to measure the next day. Quiet. The kitchen was quiet. Grrr. The drawer was a covered counter crooned of the close-by cupboard when Twilight pried it open. Something aside to toast. Frying. Working with hot things, still asleep. Maybe a drink. Clunk. Shut. The fridge revealed the spoils of its plundery, awaiting a raiding party expectant of the excavating of its treasures. Twilight wished afternoon to grow there, but none came. A head of lettuce looked at her threateningly, ready to roll in any direction. The fridge fell shut with a sigh. Twilight breathed with it, soaking the kitchen air in her discontent. Could go out. Might find an unpleasantness in the hour, but the air outside would be waking. Who decided that? Emergent properties of uncirculated oxygen. Temperature. May as well douse myself in a sink stream. Not very refreshing. Go for coffee. The hooded jacket in the clothes closet draped its way toward selection, but Twilight pushed it to the back of consideration. Too ripe a weather for that sort of thing. Defeating the perk and purpose expression, percolation, oh, a propensity for these things this morning. Maybe there's no need for coffee. That's practically a cardinal utterance. Twilight yanked the door open and squinted away the sun. No child in its right mind should be up this early. How does the princess feel about coffee? Step, cold steps. Kerthump, shut. Town sound and stasis around now. Waking taking too much out of folks. I'm the only one up in the world, if the world was empty. Would I find myself in it? Need provisions. Organization doesn't do when there's nothing and no one to organize. Can't bring back the dead by counting rocks. What a lovely start to the morning. Back to coffee. Little bit of dew on the soul. Perks up the soul. Immortal soul. Feel more or less asleep already. Room for a few more at this hour on the way. Not only there's a pony. Nod hello. Oh, wave yes. There you are. Can't remember something with an S. Star shimmer shine swirl? No, that's last night. Walking by now. Good morning, Twilight. Good morning. Have an exit by forgetfulness. Wave, wave, and she's vanishing into off-stage with the grass in a path forward like its direction. Going on, getting opening the day, and the rest of everything can wait. With a deft countenance of an own ambulatory preference, two-fold walked on left side, teacher, and an unsure light shade of underhoof. New, mark on her side, string something. Oh, good morning, Twilight. I didn't expect to run into you this early. Let out inside, a late riser, aside. Morning, miss. No, miss. I am a bit earlier than usual, Twilight admitted with a dwindled grin, hoof rub onto spot of under mane. Just going to get some coffee to help make me up. Cheerily doffed her head in absence of a hat while her minted companion cooled on, as good as unblinking. Twilight's smile wiggled. I always find a nice strong tea to be a good pick-me-up in the morning, cheerily soothed. Of course she did what does, tea. Wiggle mint, to her side left tea harpstrings. Blink, smile nod. I'll keep that in mind. Beat, still smiling. Wished to walk toward where she was wanting no tea there. Oh, forgive me, cheerily blurbled with a chamomile intonement. I don't think you two have met. Not in the least I can remember her more than some pony else in the background, probably something insipid like Happy Harp. Okay, hold your tongue, that's the sun blur, and no caffeine. No, I don't think we have. Tipped to the touch of hoof, hello, say hello. Hello. Nervous and nonchalant in avant, don't let that missing cup of color hoof shake. Twilight, this is Lyra. She's the newest member of our book club. What hour to dig for our new bitter sour. Twilight bit her tongue and dipped her smile into low corners. Book club. The light specks in open air on dog-eared pages, content listings under eyelids, only empty sentences staring back at her, politeness or don't. Cheerily's face recame as though she had recalled a regret imminent in her intonation. She hurried in a sudden display of recalcitrant disposition. Twilight eyed the annotated shifting and ascribed a footnote in her mental appendix. Oh goodness, it just occurred to me. I have mentioned the book club, haven't I? In a village, in a house, in a library, stewing away at night on just that sort of rumination, don't think for a second not to inundate with reproach coming from outside, coming from inside. Twilight prickled a bristle underneath a soft shiver of smile. No, I don't think you have. Cheerily's tea left receipt in lavender solution for a poor morning. She frowned. I think you must be right. It always did seem strange to me when I thought about it, how a Ponyville book club could be missing the most well-read mare in the entire town. She had the sense to cover her typographical and her reprobate polish. Of course it was always a truthful travesty, albeit one that she had only unearthed now, to be in absentia, the dialect of fortitude, of unequivocal study, learned and versed, manifestum indicium. Maybe it was a disdain for narrative, telling herself a story about some pony who didn't care for story. There was no excuse. Books were books. Amore librum. She was a perfect fit. What kind of a conduct was it to admit her from inclusion, taking into consideration at ever offer accounting for the sun was out for page turning? She had her figurative nose in a literal book, enough to miss an oh wait, that was it. She had her figurative nose in a literal book enough to miss an oh, that was it. Regress. She can't read it. Afternoon. Twilight, she said. Afternoon, Twilight. Absurd. What are you up to? Some assemblage of sentences and something book club, that was it then, and here vaunted into victimhood. Well, too deep into it to turn the other way now. It's not a big deal, Twilight deflected. It probably just slipped your mind. To absolve her Thorfod of its Pandora's palpability, green on looking. No ins. Well, I suppose now is a good time as any. Would you like to join us for our meeting tonight, Twilight? Flicker of figuring was an inevitable eventuality. Why hadn't she kept ahead? What was the evening out when the sun was gone, when coffee was a much unnecessary as sleep elsewise she had one and not the other? It's a bit short notice, Twilight quibbled, leaning imperceptibly to the side. What's the name of the book you'll be discussing? Cheerily moved her mouth to manifest the behest of Twilight's request for information, but Lyra's first indication of presence presented itself in an interruption. The days and dalliances of a fortunate fool, Lyra quoted lyrically. It's an inspirational autobiography from a local pony. Probably my favorite read of the year. Umbrage, verbal pulp. Twilight bittered. She had mulched a Kogan literary. She had mulched a more Kogan literary. Some mare from Ponyville, Cloudsdale, or other had visited it unto the world. Twilight's lips threatened to let her hush words out, but politeness overbared. I don't think I've read that one yet, so I probably wouldn't have much to contribute to the discussion. Maybe next time, though. Cheerily, Worm smiled blithely. Lyra mimicked, oblivious. Twilight manifest a shadow of discontent. Yes, of course. I'll be sure to give you enough notice so you can come to the next meeting. It was a token of relevance, and now enough. To be buried in a keepsake drawer somewhere. What if Recumbered book knows? No, thank you. For sure. Feel free to drop in and give me a heads up. Sideways, slanting, and still 3 of them. Now just standing. No tea. Well, I'd better get going. Though, to keep my eyes open without my coffee in the mornings. That was why mornings were afternoons, or cups were brewed hoof-claw bread and brought up with breakfast. Lyra looked on. Oh, of course, cheerily assured, holding a hoof sweetly to her chest. Don't let me keep you, then. Bob bobbed back. It was nice meeting you. You too. There was an air in there, no doubt. Muty, hollow hop, the days and dalliances of a silent soul, albeit enduring green. Twilight swayed brashly in either direction, sun in her head. Bye for now, she said, already assuming the motion of her morning expedition. Unheard goodbyes and passed by, practically a barrier to proper progression of the day. At least she was polite. An instant was more than enough time to spend on digressions. Politeness, a preponderance in paltry exchange, a necessary nicety to keep conduct superficial. Not to say there's no need for niceness. Morning muttering again. Best to keep moving. At a halfway juncture marking a separation of return point, a large statue crested the sideways of Twilight's periphery. Turning her head towards it, the monument bloomed forthright in a familiar face's majestic formation, emblazoned in announcement by the pronouncement of the sun behind. Sky fire from rising wary and dewdrops given from shielding condensed overhead. Twilight was struck in momentary reverence. The sun was beautiful. Too simple a summation, something that brings life, light orb of keeping ever all casting from heaven's reaches, outward into forever, principle of celestial benevolence, bringing warmth out in cold, revitalizing all things in remembrance of purpose, waking sleep from circumstance and dusk butterflies from their beds. That statue, what does it mean to have your likeness at leisure in every prefecture? The humbling of reverence is too heady for mortality. The sunlight lit aside for a moment, and Twilight collected her bearings, bearing a sudden clarity for her solar idolarity. Books leave a bad taste in the mouth. Maybe something simple would be more beneficial. Walking, Twilight watched as sunbeams wind themselves into spiral curls of atmospheric refraction. Too convoluted. Where is the inspiration in saying something looks pretty? I awoke to the sun, and it looked nice. The morning felt good, though I was tired. Twilight moved forward, rolling words around in her head. Simple, sun, some, building up of expectation, adoration, something nice, something keeping warm. No more trying that on for size. The best thoughts are the ones that make themselves. What meaning can we have for something so great when its emulation is in concentration for a living entity? Twilight lifted a hoof over a four-eyed insect, wiggling its spindly stalks as it watched her go past. Whereupon is the significance of life, if it is transient? Walking a panting stretch of town would compound to the same solution. Coffee or no coffee. X or Y. Variables are unchanging of the equation's resolution. Coffee, and then you die. Unless you don't. Have to ask her sometime. The moon lends itself better to something stronger. jitter, or mouthful, with hidden things inside to keep your brain awake. We don't see the agents of eye-opening as they work, but we know they're there. Celestial affordance has no need. Sleep when sleeping, and not otherwise. Have to ask. Approaching closer the coffee shop, unassailed by distractions outside her own head, Twilight cast one more consideration skyward. The luminescence of the sun's presence loomed back at her. The other agent of harmony is equilibrium. Compassion is equidistance, preservation proportion of proximity. Peh, peh, peh. Sound that gets in your head. If there's room in an even stride for one other side, do they turn together? How does that dictate an eternal cycle? The day is longer than the night. There's a whole resentment about it. Must like coffee. Bitterant. Staying awake for 1,000 years at least. Have to ask. This early, and there's no line. Must be at least one inside. Even rising with the sun. There's some pony up early. Must make her own, if she does. Have to ask. Wish I had a list. As the store's front approached, Twilight searched her saddlebags for an errant scrap of paper, aside from preparatory collection of currency she would need to purchase her drink. The saddlebags whizzed by, avoiding her sides through memory and omission. At home with the jacket, no doubt. In the closet where they fell. Sky strike. Meteor debris. Drat. Have to ask. Twilight's hoof found the door handle in hesitation. Her mind flickered in search of the circumnavigation to her emerging frustration. Teleportation might do, but coffee acquisition was no suitable application for her magic. If it was that simple, she'd have one brought over herself. Drat. With a defeated dejection, Twilight frowned and turned from her morning animus. A shoulder introduced itself. Tongue on teeth, oof, rubbing on her forehead. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were opening the door to go in. Know that voice. A higher tenure register, alphabetum vocalis. Seeds, something, something. Twilight opened her eyes, light wood and auburn. Sorry, it's my fault. I didn't look where I turned to. A mop like painted on polished mop mane and eyes that seemed a little sad. Twilight abashed. That's okay. You were just leaving then? More conversational than I remember. Maybe I'm misremembering. Had an air about him in the library. Leaned on a stack of books that went flying. Turned red from yellow. Bit of a tingle. Yeah, I came to get a drink, but I just realized I left all my bits at home. He smiled. Weak. Wobble. Need to remember now. Nothing for names unless they're literary or dead. Something sweet. Candy trickle, treacle, sweet tooth. Why am I leaning on a sugar strand when he's only just smiling? Caramel. That's awful. I can't imagine getting through the morning with no coffee. Caramel, if it was his bittersweet smile, offered an extension of exchange in his eyes. Twilight was unprepared to proffer her purlance, and stammered on silence. Yeah. Well, Caramel dazzled forfeit of intention. Would you like me to cover you this morning? Hot creeping in her cheeks, the sun couldn't swelter that simply. Swallow only air. Oh, I couldn't. I insist, he said with a nudge open of the waiting ostium esglisse. Twilight stepped over the threshold, awash in self-ascriptive internal pretension. At once the aroma of invigorating vitae non vitae, vitae caphalis reburante, breathing and being reborn, hiss, steam, cupful, faberum vitae. Ah, smells good, doesn't it? Dosette percepted to her left. Too early to be at wits with suspicion of magnetism, smiled past the bloom. Yes, definitely. She said in allowance of her unpreparedness. You sure you don't mind? I could go back home and get some money. The apostolate at work behind the sutra machination ushered a rhapsody of steam into cup over counter. His coat matched his procurement, and nodding of his brow signaled an acknowledgment from his discipline. Be with you in a moment, he mumbled monk-shodden over a merging elixir. It's fine, Caramel said in either direction. Caramel approached the collection altar, rendering his offering from a pouch slung over his shoulder. Surely the brew of the morning, all things ritual and rising as the sun. Have to ask her. What can I get you? Asked behind the counter with a near non-monotone. Just a small coffee for me, please. 1 cream, 2 sugar. Caramel exuded. Saccharine. Smiled. Small coffee for me, thanks. Black. Twilight sparkled of the night sky and daybreak. She blushed and looked toward the high rise of the chapel ceiling. Verium in agnanam. Verium in ania. Fuck it. And a large black coffee, Caramel said, languish with a reluctant acceptance on the tip of Twilight's tongue. Bashfully she blushed, but beamed behind star-shimmer eyes. Thank you again. No problem. The two stood in tandem solitude while the apostle applied his ministration to the preparation of their morning appetites. High sermon, sup of the sacrament, bitter like an unloved child, sweetened with sacred remembrance. Can't let the mouth water at something like that. Sacrilege. Deity is consul in suppression Saturninia. Solar, not sleep alleviate supplement. Have to ask her. Just gotta ask her everything, do you? 2 drinks tendered on the counter, brimming with expectation. Either hoof took up and supped, unleery of scalding. All at once. An exaltation of flash flood inundation, with vigor over buds, in a river run of ecstasy, of black-hot heraldry, forever over-rising Solaris sip, of solemn holding ceremony, for slumber washed over by rapid fire waves of far-away cultivated crops, diluted essence, of insight inviting to evidence, of inspirational vocational scriptural volition, brimming over with light shut by seeds soaked in ground ray refraction catalyst, let out and release, to reprieve from unwaking opening, onward and breathing, back life, into open eyes like sky fire causing them, a light, a minister, a drip, to the tongue, and let in overflow of awareness come forward all at once. Ah.